Nakikita po ba?
Sige, so that's the PowerPoint, right? So if you can try to put it on, ano na ba yan? Yan na. Okay na yan. Yung kanina. Hindi yung kanina yung descriptive. Descriptive. Sige pa. Move backward. It's page. Sige lang. Sige pa. Yung may categorical and continuous data. Yan. Okay. So, okay. So you can see descriptive statistics.
Hello, ma'am?
Wait lang.
Bakit?
Oo, sige. Is it the correct one? Okay. Dali lang dyan. So we have two under descriptive statistics. We have two categorical data, continuous data. Under categorical, we have frequency contingency table. Then we have for continuous data, we have location. Okay. Location, dispersion, then shape. If we can, differential statistics. If you can go directly to the next one, which is so that I can start with the inferential statistics and hypothesis testing. So, okay. So it is, okay, nasaan na ako? We have under inferential statistics and hypothesis testing. Bakit kaya I'm not seeing my own? Yeah, I think, Jen, sorry. I think nagkapalit yung ano. Anyway, dun sa inference, inferential statistics and hypothesis testing. In inferential statistics, it involves making inferences about a population based on a sample of data. So hypothesis testing is a method used to determine whether there is enough evidence in a sample of data to infer that a certain condition holds for the entire population. The key components of inferential statistics and hypothesis testing include inference, design of experiment, sample size determination, general estimation, and specific tests. So under inference, it involves using sample data to make generalizations about a population. So there are key techniques. So I would like to start with confidence interval. This involves a range of values derived from sample data that is likely to contain in the population parameter. For example, when you are estimating the average height of a population based on a sample with a 95% confidence interval of 160 cm to 170 cm. So that's how we do, that's how confidence interval works. Then Bayesian inference means it is a method of statistical inference that updates the probability for a hypothesis as more evidence or information becomes available. So example, when you update the probability of disease presence as more diagnostic test results become available. Then significance is the probability that the observed result is due to chance. It is often represented by the p-value. For example, a p-value of 0.05 indicates a 5% probability that the observed results are due to random chance. Meta-analysis still under inference, combining data from multiple studies to draw a more powerful conclusion. You normally hear this, right? Meta-analysis. For example, aggregating results from several clinical trials to determine the overall effectiveness of a new drug. Design of experiment, that's the second diagram, involves planning and conducting experiments to ensure valid and reliable results. So under design is controlled experiments where all variables are kept constant except for the variable being tested. Example, when you're trying to test the effectiveness of a new medication where one group receives the medication, another receives a placebo. The actual experiment, observational study where the researcher has no control over the variables but can observe the effects of naturally occurring differences. For example, when you're studying the health effects of living near a polluted area. So the next is observational study. Means this is done when a researcher observes and records behavior without manipulating any variables. Example, when you're studying dietary habits by observing people's food choices in a cafeteria, for example. Replication is repeating an experiment to verify results and ensure reliability. Okay, when you conduct the same psychological experiment in different settings to verify results. So that's replication. Blocking. Blocking is grouping experimental units that are similar in some way and randomly assigning treatments within these groups to control for variables. For example, in agriculture, blocking might involve grouping plants by soil type to control for its effects on growth. Then sample size determination is crucial to ensure that the sample accurately represents the population. So under this is statistical power, the probability that a test will correctly reject a false null hypothesis. For example, a study with high statistical power has a great chance of detecting an effect if there's one. Effect size means the magnitude of the difference or relationship being studied. For example, the difference in test score between two teaching methods. Standard error means the standard deviation of the sampling distribution of a statistic. Example, smaller standard error indicates more precise estimates. Then range, standard deviation, coefficient of variation, percentile. So these are measures of dispersion that describe the spread of data. A low standard deviation indicates data points are close to the mean. General estimation, so second to the last, This involves estimating population parameters based on sample data. By Bayesian estimator is incorporates prior knowledge along with the current data to make inferences. For example, when in estimating disease prevalence using prior studies and current data. Method of moments is estimating parameters by maximizing the likelihood that the observed data occurred. Example, estimating the rate of occurrence of an event in Poisson distribution, for example. Minimum distance, maximum spacing, density estimation. These are various methods for estimating population parameters based on minimizing or maximizing certain criteria. For example, density estimation to determine the probability, yeah. Okay, just a moment. Okay, so example is density estimation to determine the probability distribution of a data set. Specific tests, the last one here, these are used to test hypotheses and draw conclusion about the data. So we have z-test, normal. These are tests for the mean of a population when the population variance is known. Example, when you're testing testing if the average height of students is different from national average. T-test, test for the mean of a population when the population variance is unknown. So that's opposite z-test because population variance is known. Here in t-test when population variance is unknown. Example, comparing the average test scores of two different classes. Chi-square test is a test for independence of goodness of fit for categorical data. This is example, testing if two categorical variables are independent, such as gender and voting preference. And then we have Mann-Whitney U. Is this the way how we pronounce this one? The Wilcoxon signed rank test under specific tests. These are non-parametric tests used when data do not follow a normal distribution. Example, comparing the ranks of score between two groups. So inferential statistics and hypothesis testing are essential tools in research for making generalizations about populations based on sample data. We go to the next slide. Okay, next slide. So I think you're using now the PowerPoint, Jenna, no?
Yes po, ma'am.
Okay. Just a moment, I'll just get water. Okay. What is this diagram? Still on statistics, define research, formulate hypothesis. Okay. So the first, this is a process. So which involves defining research questions, formulating hypotheses, gathering data, and employing both descriptive and inferential statistics to draw conclusions. So the first step in any statistical analysis is to clearly define the research question and formulate the hypothesis. This step sets the direction for data collection and analysis. So, example, when we try to evaluate a new teaching method, so that's a research question, right? That's a new teaching method, improve student performance, things like that. And then hypothesis could be students thought with the new method will score higher on test than those taught with traditional methods. So that's a hypothesis. When gathering data and collect sample, it involves gathering relevant data through various methods such as surveys, experiments, or observational studies, as I mentioned earlier. So the collected data should be representative of the population being studied to ensure valid collections. For example, when you have collected responses from a sample of a population to understand their opinions or behaviors, or through experiments. So you by conducting controlled experiments to test the effects of a treatment or intervention. Descriptive statistics, so I've mentioned already about descriptive and inferential, but let's try to do as what you can see in the diagram here. Yeah, I can repeat anyway about what I've mentioned about descriptive statistics, which is the, its role. Descriptive statistics summarize and describe the main features of a data set, providing a sample or a simple overview of the data. So through percentiles, quartiles, median. So what is what is percentiles? It indicate the relative standing of a value within a data set. Quartiles is when you divide the data into 4 equal parts. Median, the middle value when the data is ordered. Okay, so it's easy. So for example, in a data set of student test scores, the median score represents the midpoint, while quartiles can show the distribution of scores. For central tendency number 2, under descriptive statistics, mean, the average value, median, middle value, mode, the most frequently occurring value. So when you may be asked in your board exam to calculate the mean test score to understand the average performance of students. Then dispersion number 3 is variance, standard deviation, coefficient of variation. Okay. Variance this is the measures, okay, the spread of the data points. Standard deviation is the square root of the variance, indicating the average distance from the mean. And coefficient of variation is the ratio of the standard deviation to the mean. Example, using standard deviation to understand how much individual test scores vary from the average score. Okay, so if we are now on inferential statistics, I think I also mentioned about this is using sample data to make generalizations about a population. So it includes estimating population parameters and testing hypothesis. Confidence intervals, so that's the first one under inferential. This is a range of values within which the population parameter is expected to fall with a certain level of confidence, for example, 95%. So example, estimating the average height of a population with a 95% confidence interval, just as I mentioned earlier as an example. Then hypothesis tests, methods for testing if it is a method for testing if there's enough evidence to reject a null hypothesis in favor of an alternative hypothesis. So example, using a t-test to compare the mean scores of two groups. Then hypothesis testing is you can see there one sample and two samples, right? So one sample test, it tests whether a sample mean or proportion differs from a known population mean or proportion. Example, t-test for the mean, chi-square test for variance. So two sample tests test whether the means or proportions of two independent samples differ. Under two sample is continuous data means yeah, this is making use of t-test for comparing means. And then categorical data is Pearson chi-square test for independence. There are two methodologies there, two tests. Example, comparing the average test scores of students from two different teaching methods using a t-test. So that's under two sample test. Then measures of association. Okay, there's correlation then. Correlation measures the strength and direction of the linear relationship between two continuous variables. Example, Pearson correlation coefficient to assess the relationship between study hours and test scores. So for categorical variables, measures like phi, Kramer's V, are used to assess the association between two categorical variables. Example, Kramer's V to measure the association between gender and preference for a particular teaching method. Then there's regression. It is a vital tool for analyzing data and making informed decisions. By using both descriptive and inferential statistics, researchers can summarize data, test hypotheses, and make predictions. Understanding these stat methods and their applications allows researchers to draw meaningful conclusions and provide insights into various fields of study like urban planning. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, slower. So what do we have here? Measures of central tendency. So I think I mentioned also earlier that measures of central tendency are statistical measures that describe the center or middle of a data set. So they provide a summary of the data by identifying a central point around which the data points are distributed. So I also mentioned the main measures of central tendency are the mean, median, and mode. Again, mean, often referred to as the average, is the sum of all the data points divided by the number of data points. It is a measure of central value of the data set. So we have formula. I'm not sure if you're able to see it, but for sure after all the lectures, we will go back again and let's do problem solving and let's do some examinations continuously. So I'm really looking forward to that particular part. I hope it can be the strategy would be most helpful. So what is the formula of mean? So summation, mean equals the summation of x divided by n, okay, where x stands for the sample mean, and x is each individual data point, and n is number of data points. So the mean is sensitive to extreme values, the outliers, if you know that. So it is useful for data sets without outliers and with a symmetric distribution. In the example, average test, sorry, let me just check it a little bit. So yeah, average test scores, for example, sum of all students' test scores divided by the number of students. So that's easy, right? And then another example, when you want to solve for average income, so that's the total income of group of people divided by the number of people. So that's easy. You will always remember that mode. The mode is the value that occurs most frequently in a data set. So a data set can have more than one mode, bimodal or multimodal, if multiple values have the highest frequency. So the mode is useful for categorical data where we wish to know the most common category. It is not affected by outliers. So for example, most common shoe size. So the shoe size that appears most frequently in a survey, like 5, 6, 7, 7. So yeah, I think so. 7 is the most common, even without saying, right? But of course, depends on the data provided. So popular product color, the color of a product that is most frequently chosen by customers. Okay, so the median is the middle value of an ordered data set. If the number of observations is odd, the median is the middle number. Okay, so if even, it is the average of the two middle numbers. So please remember that. Okay, if it's odd, the middle number. But in case it is even, so 6, for example, then get the middle and then get the average. So that's the median. So what's the formula? Okay. You can see there anyway. So it's even if without the formula, we can always say ME, or the median, equals L. L plus what you can see there. L plus N plus 1 over 2 minus C times I. So even if you can always calculate without remembering the formula, right? But just for the sake of studying and hindi lang tayo mag-guilty na hindi natin nadaanan, right? All this what you see on slides. So L is the lower boundary of the median class. Then N there is the number of observations, okay? And C, there is cumulative frequency of the class before the median class, for example. Then I, class interval of the median class. So the median is less sensitive to outliers compared to the mean. It is useful for skewed distributions. For example, if during the board exam, it will not just be asking you to define, but for example, it will provide for, or it will ask about median house price, for example. So the middle value of house prices sorted from lowest to highest, so that's the median. Another example, when you will be asked about median age, so the middle age in a sorted list of ages in a population. So that's the answer. So symmetrical versus skewed distributions. So what's the difference? A perfectly symmetrical distribution, the mean, median, and mode are all equal and located at the center of the distribution. And this often occurs in a normal distribution, the bell curve. You see the bell curve there. So skewed distribution, what does it mean? The mean, median, and mode are not equal, okay, in a skewed distribution. The distribution can be positively skewed, right skewed siya, okay, right skewed, or negatively skewed, left skewed, okay. So, for just to describe that, why it's positively skewed or negatively skewed, that when you are provided an example on income distribution where a few high incomes skew the mean to the right, okay, so that's positive and it's toward the right. Then negatively skewed means that, for example, age at retirement, where early retirees skew the mean to the left, so that's what you call negatively skewed. So measures of central tendency provide a summary statistic that represents the center point of a data set, and the mean is useful for data sets without outliers and symmetric distributions, while the median is better for skewed distributions and data with outliers. We go to the next slide. Okay. So we have formulas all over. That's the measures of dispersion under descriptive statistics. So again, what are measures? Why do we need these measures of dispersion? They are used to describe the spread of variability within a data set. They provide insights into the extent to which data points differ from the central tendency, the mean median mode. So the primary measures of dispersion include range, variance, and standard deviation. Okay, so let's try to review again. I know you've encountered this many times, okay? So range, the range is the simplest measure of dispersion calculated as the difference between the highest and lowest values in a data set. So what's the formula? Simple, right? Range equals maximum value minus minimum value. So the range provides a quick sense of the spread, but it is sensitive to outliers. So it does not give information about the distribution of values between the extremes. Example, when you try to get income range, that in a data set of incomes, if the highest income is 100,000, okay, monthly income, and the lowest is 20,000. So what's the range? It is, what's the range, anyone? 120. You just have to deduct. You just have to make a minus the maximum value minus minimum value. So that's the range equals 100,000 minus 20,000 equals 80,000. So that's the range. We go to variance. Variance measures the average squared deviation of each data point from the mean. It quantifies the degree of spread in the data. What's the formula? So S square, variance. It's equal to summation of yi minus y prime square raised to the second power divided by n minus 1, where y1 is each individual data point. Okay. Square, so sample variance. And y prime is sample mean. And n equals number of data points, so that's the sample variance. Then population variance is that phi, right? So is it phi square equals, correct me if I'm wrong, okay? Yeah, I forgot how to name the symbols. So summation of yi minus mu. So I'm very sure that's mu square over n. So yi is each individual data point, and mu is population mean, and n is total number of data points. So if you look at the formula for the variance, so there's sample variance and there's the population variance. Okay, variance is expressed in squared units of the original data, making it less intuitive to interpret. So it is useful for comparing variability between different data sets. For example, in test scores, for example, where you are calculating the variance in test scores to understand how much scores differ from the average score. So it is an example when you are using the variance. And then also in investment returns, assessing the variance in returns of different investment portfolios to evaluate risks. But of course, so there's a time always for giving you sample problem for each of this. So we just have to understand the concept first, so that when we try to go over again, go all over again on these concepts and formulas, it's taking second look would be would be easier for all of you. So standard deviation indicates the average distance of data points from the mean. It is widely used because it is in the same units as the data, making it easier to interpret. The goodness of the standard deviation is related to how well it represents the spread of data around the mean. How do we apply this one? In class scores, for example, if the standard deviation of test scores in a class is low, it means most students scored close to the average. Okay. Stock prices, another example. A high standard deviation in stock prices indicates high volatility. So measures of dispersion provide valuable information about the variability within a data set. The range gives a basic indication of spread, while variance and standard deviation offer more detailed insights into the distribution of data points around the mean. How does this become useful? Understanding these measures is crucial for interpreting data and making informed decisions based on statistical analysis. We go to the next slide. So data display, so a lot there. There's Venn diagram, there's pie chart, dots, scatter plot bar. This is just showing you how data could be displayed, so, or it could be diagram or could be drawn. Data display is important in descriptive statistics as it helps to visualize data, making it easier to understand patterns, trends, and relationships. So various types of charts and diagrams are used to present data effectively. Of course, there are components. The bar charts, for example, represent categorical data with rectangular bars. So the length of each bars is proportional to the value it represents. So like sales data, when you compare sales of different products, and survey responses when you are displaying the number of respondents for each category. So there are, I'm not sure if you're familiar of the different, how you can illustrate the bar charts. There's what we call the stacked bar chart, as you can see on the left side. Okay, bottom left. Stacked bar chart, it shows parts of a whole by stacking bars for different subcategories on top of each other. Okay, then Pareto bar chart, it's the bottom middle. Okay, Pareto bar chart combines bar and line charts, typically used to identify the most significant factors in a data set. Then the line graphs, you can see, yeah, line graphs display data points connected by straight lines. So they are used to show trends over time. For example, stock prices, when you are showing how stock prices change over a period of time, So temperature also, when you're displaying temperature changes over a week. So run chart, what does it mean? It's a trend chart. It is a specific type of line graph used to monitor changes in a process over time. Then the pie charts is very common. It represent a data as slices of a circle, where each slice corresponds to categories proportion of the whole. So when this is useful when you are showing a market share of different companies, or when you are displaying how a budget is divided among different departments, such as the budget allocation. So the pie chart, each slice represents a category's distribution to the total. So there's also a flow chart. Do we see a flow chart here? It illustrates a process or workflow, showing the steps as boxes and connecting them with arrows, like business processes. When you are mapping out steps in a business process, or like CLUP process, that you have the 12 steps there normally, but it's not really 12 for me. It should be more. When you're trying to when you try to broaden it into subsequence or sub processes in the CLUP process. Then algorithm steps, this is visualizing steps in an algorithm. Then the scatter diagram, you can see, is otherwise known as the scatter plots, when you try to display the relationships between two numerical variables. So each point represents an observation. So as in height versus weight, for example, so you are showing the relationship between height and weight of individuals. And when you are also showing sales versus advertising, when you are analyzing the relationship between advertising spend and sales. So you can also see scatter plot. These are points. Points are plotted on a two-dimensional graph to visualize the correlation between variables. Then there's histograms. It represents the distribution of numerical data by grouping data into bins and displaying the frequency of each bin as a bar. So for example, exam scores, when you're showing the distribution of scores in a class, and when you are displaying the age distribution of a population. So, okay. Histogram bars represent the frequency of data points within each bin. Then, this is my favorite, which is the Venn diagram. I normally use this one in anything, like, yeah. So instead of just writing paragraphs, I also provide Venn diagrams, because you can show the logical relationships between different sets, right? So just few days ago, Jen and myself had we did what's this that we did strategic planning for a particular LGU, and so we did like this with I've done Venn diagram, so that you can you're able to show or demonstrate the logical relationships between the inputs of your participants. And in normally circles represent sets, and their overlaps show common elements. So example set theory, you're illustrating relationship between different sets, while market segmentation, for example, when you're showing overlaps between different market segments, many more. And of course, a Venn diagram, circles overlap to show commonalities and differences among sets. Like when we were in grade 1, right? Grade 1, I remember that already. It's being taught, right? The Venn diagram is such a nice one, even for below, for even for the kindergarten. You can start showing Venn diagrams to make sure that because Venn diagram, even if you're an executive already and you still find that very useful, So data display techniques are essential for summarizing and interpreting data visually. So by using all these things that you are seeing on this single on this slide, using bar charts, line graphs, pie charts, flow charts, scatter diagrams, histograms, and Venn diagrams, researchers and analysts can effectively communicate data insights, identify trends, and make informed decisions. So we go to the next slide, inferential statistics. Go to the next slide. Okay. So inferential statistics involves using data from a sample to make inferences or generalizations about a larger population. And this branch of statistics helps researchers draw conclusions, make predictions, and decide on the characteristics of populations based on the information gathered from samples. We have key components, as you can see there. So what's the purpose of inferential statistics? First, to infer or draw conclusions about the population based on sample data. Another purpose is to make statements, predictions, or decisions regarding population parameters. Another one is to determine how reliable or how reliably a sample statistic represents a population parameter. So another key component there is sample and population. Okay, so what is a sample? It's a subset of the population selected for observation and analysis. And so population is the entire group of individuals or instances about whom we hope to learn. So for example, we have a population of, we're looking at all students in a university as the population, and then a group of 200 students randomly selected from the university as a sample for anything, right? So reliability of sample statistics, okay, inferential statistics help assess, okay, the reliability and accuracy of sample statistics in estimating population parameters. It involves evaluating the sampling error and determining confidence intervals. So we example is estimating the average height of students in a university based on a sample and calculating the confidence interval for the estimate. Then another component is making judgments, so that we are on the fourth bullet. So inferential statistics provides tools to test hypotheses and make judgments about the differences or relationships between groups. So it helps in determining whether observed differences are statistically significant or due to random chance. So testing whether a new teaching method is more effective than the traditional method based on test scores from two groups of students. Then there are key concepts also and tools in inferential statistics. We have the discrete random variables, the first bullet there. What is this? These are variables that take on accountable number of distinct values. For example, number of students in a class, or a number of defective items in a batch. So these are examples. And then continuous random variables pertain to variables that can take on any value within a given range. For example, height, weight, temperature. So normal distribution there, third bullet, is a continuous, is continuous probability distribution that is symmetrical and bell-shaped. Also, many statistical tests assume that the data follows a normal distribution. Example, distribution of students' IQ scores. That's normal distribution. And then the Z table is a table that provides the data, provides the area or probability under the standard normal curve corresponding to a given Z-score. It is used to find probabilities and percentiles for standard normal distributions. Example, when you're finding the probability that a test score is above a certain value. Confidence intervals for unknown parameters means these are a range of values derived from the sample data that is likely to contain the population parameter with a specified level of confidence, like 95%. So this is the third time probably I'm giving this example. So another one is estimating the mean salary of employees in a company with a 95% confidence interval. Then principles of testing and hypothesis. Okay. This is a method to determine whether there's enough evidence to reject a null hypothesis in favor of an alternative hypothesis. For example, testing whether the average score of new teaching method is higher than the traditional method. So inferential statistics is essential for making generalizations from sample data to a larger population, and by using tools like confidence intervals, hypothesis tests, and understanding distributions, researchers can make informed decisions and predictions about populations. And we go to the next slide. So again, sample and population. Okay, so what should I say about this one? I think I mentioned already about population. Population is the entire collection, right? So of individuals or objects under consideration in a statistical study. And while a sample is a subset of the population selected for analysis. So a parameter there, there's a parameter, okay. Is a summary measure that describes a characteristic of the population. For example, the average age of all voters, so the total number of students in a university, or the proportion of defective items in a factory's outputs. Okay, so I think this is easy. We go to the next page or next slide. Next slide. Okay. Statistical inference. There are 5 general rules of inference. It involves making conclusions about a population based on sample data. So you can see the outline here. Okay. This is to guide the process to ensure it's conducted systematically and accurately. So number 1 is state hypothesis clearly. So clearly define the null and alternative hypothesis before collecting and analyzing data. The null hypothesis typically represents no effect or no difference, while the alternative hypothesis represents an effect or a difference. So null hypothesis, how do you state that one? For example, there is no difference in the average test scores between students taught with method A and method B. So that's a null hypothesis. The alternative, how do you phrase alternative hypothesis, that there is a difference in the average test scores between students taught with method A and method B. So that's a difference. Then understand the nature and limits of the statistical test. Be aware of the assumptions and requirements of the statistical test you plan to use. So each test has specific conditions under which it is valid, such as the type of data, sample size, and distribution. So in t-test, for example, assumptions, so t-test assumptions, the data should be approximately normally distributed and the sample should have equal variances. While in chi-square test assumptions, the data should be categorical and the expected frequency in each category should be at least 5. Then third is utilize visual representations. So I've discussed all those charts, graphs, and other visual tools to explore and understand the data. And so it can help identify patterns, trends, and outliers that might not be apparent from raw data alone. So yeah, scatter plot, for example, when this is used to visualize the relationship between two continuous variables, while a box plot and used to display the distribution of the data set and identify outliers. Use number 4 is use an alternative method if possible. This is you need to validate findings by using different statistical tests or methods. If results are consistent across multiple tests, they are more likely to be reliable. So this practice helps to confirm that the results are not dependent on the choice of a specific test. Yeah. We need to check being robust through for example, if a t-test and a Mann-Whitney U-test both show significant differences between groups, the findings are more robust. Alternative tests when using both parametric, for example, ANOVA, and non-parametric, Kruskal-Wallis test to verify results. Then the last one, determining conclusions in a reasonable and reliable manner. The goal is to draw meaningful and accurate conclusions, not just to achieve statistical significance. So we consider it considers the practical significance of the results and ensure that conclusions are based on a comprehensive analysis. Yeah, we go to, okay, yeah, later, we go for practical applications later. Okay, we go to the next slide, Jen. So what is the sampling frame and types of sampling? I think yeah, it says here sampling frame is a list of all the individuals in the population from which the sample is taken. For example, families with numbers in a telephone book. Okay. Then we have all regular students of college, all cities with independent charter. It is just showing the different sampling method. Simple, when units are randomly chosen from the sampling frame, multi-stage. So randomly select population units, then randomly select individuals with within units, sorry, then stratified some systematic clusters each. Okay, purposive quotas. I think there's can we advance to the next so that the explanations of this particular slide, I'll explain it here on the next slide. So I think that's the one. Jen? Okay, because it's quite the same, the sampling method. Okay. So sampling techniques are methods used to select subset of individuals from a population to represent the whole, and these techniques can be broadly categorized into two types: probability sampling and non-probability sampling. So each category includes various specific methods, each suitable for different types of research and data analysis. Non-probability sampling methods do not involve random selection, and thus not every individual has a chance of being included in the sample. So these methods are often easier and more cost-effective, but can introduce bias. So we have judgmental sampling, which is sometimes called purposive sampling. In judgmental sampling, the researcher uses their judgment to select the sample that they believe is most representative of the population. For example, when selecting experts in a field for a study on advanced scientific techniques. Then convenience sampling, the sample is taken from a group that is conveniently accessible to the researcher because it's convenient. So, for example, surveying students in a university cafeteria because they are easily acceptable. Then quota sampling is when the researcher ensures certain characteristics are represented in the sample to match the proportions in the population. For example, ensuring the sample includes a specific number of males and females to reflect the population gender ratio. Then snowball sampling can be done when, for example, existing study subjects recruit future subjects from among their acquaintances. Existing study subjects recruit future subjects from among their acquaintances. So for example, studying a hidden or hard-to-reach population like drug users or people with rare diseases, where participants refer others. It's snowball. So probability sampling here involve random selection, giving each member of the population a known, non-zero chance of being included in the sample. This method helped to ensure the sample is representative of the population. Simple, random, systematic, stratified, cluster. Okay, let me discuss this one by one. Simple random is done where every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. Drawing names, for example, out of a hat or using a random number generator to select participants from a list, isn't it? We even do that digitally. So there are already apps, platforms to do this one. Then systematic sampling, every nth member of the population is selected after a random starting point. For example, selecting every 10th person on a list of names. So that's systematic sampling. Stratified sampling is when the population is divided into subgroups or strata based on a specific characteristic, and random samples are taken from each stratum. Example, dividing a population into age groups and randomly sampling from each age group. Cluster sampling is when the population is divided into clusters, usually based on geographic areas or other natural groupings, and a random sample of clusters is chosen. So all individuals within the selected clusters are sampled. For example, selecting a few schools randomly and including all students within those schools in the sample. So market research, for example, how do you do that? selecting key opinion leaders to understand market trends, so that's judgmental. And convenient sampling when you're surveying customers at a mall. So that's simple. Then that's convenient. So simple random sampling, randomly selecting customers from a database for feedback, right? So, and many more. So we go to the next slide. Okay, coefficient of variation. It is a statistical measure of the relative variability of a data set. It is defined as the ratio of the, of the standard deviation to the mean, and is often expressed as a percentage. The CV, or the coefficient of variation, or CV, is useful for comparing the degree of variation between different data sets regardless of their units of measurement. So the CV represents the average percent estimating error when predicting subsequent observations within the representative population. It quantifies the dispersion of data points around the mean in a normalized way. Formula is CV equals S sub Y over Y prime, or the sample mean. So SY is the sample that standard deviation. Y prime is sample mean. So for a population, for example, rho, no, not rho, is it rho or phi? Sorry, I forgot. Over mu. So CV equals rho over mu. Where rho is population standard deviation and mu is population mean. How do we interpret this one? A higher CV indicates greater relative variability or dispersion around the mean. And a lower CV indicates less relative variability or more consistency in the data. Don't worry about this one. I'll be giving some examples after we finish everything. Standard error of the mean here is depends on the standard deviation of the population and size of the sample. So the SEM, or the standard error of the mean, okay, I think I mentioned already about that it depends on the standard deviation of the population and the size of the sample. So it is calculated as SEM over rho divided by square root of n, where rho is population of standard deviation and n is the sample size. So the SEM decreases as the sample size increases, or as the population standard deviation decreases, indicating more precise estimates of the population mean. There are examples here, but we're not ready to do this. Okay, there's a proper time for computation anyway, just providing you the concepts first. We go to, so the coefficient of variation is a valuable metric for comparing the relative variability of different data sets, especially when the means are different. It allows for standardized comparisons and helps in understanding the consistency and reliability of data. So for example, in various fields such as manufacturing, finance, so the CV provides insights into the relative risks, precision, and variability of the measurements. We go to covariance, to the next slide. Okay. It is also a statistical measure that indicates the extent to which two variables change together. It helps in understanding the relationship between the variables, specifically how they move relative to each other. So covariance measures how two variables vary in tandem relative to their means. So positive covariance indicates that the variables increase together, while negative covariance indicates that one variable increases as the other decreases. So there's a formula also. The covariance between two variables x and y is calculated as covariance of x and y equals summation of x minus x prime minus y prime over n minus 1. So I think I mentioned already, positive covariance, both tend to increase. Negative covariance, one increases, the other decreases. So zero, how about zero covariance? There's no linear relationship between the variables. So, okay, so probably we can have some, I already prepared some worded problems for all these concepts, but just as I mentioned, let's just deal with the concepts first. Coefficient of determination, otherwise you'll be overloaded tonight. Coefficient of determination, Jen. Next slide. Okay, so there's another one. Yeah, denoted. Okay, coefficient of determination, R square. So it is a key statistical measure and regression analysis. Okay. It represents the proportion of the variance in the dependent variable that is predictable from the independent variable. Essentially, R square means the goodness of fit of a regression model. So R square quantifies how well the independent variables or variable explain the variability of the dependent variable. It ranges from 0 to 1. So R square equals 0. So what do we mean by that? So it indicates that the model does not explain any of the variability of the dependent variable. But when R square equals 1, it indicates that the model explains all the variability of the dependent variable. So we have the formula, R square equals explained variation over total variation in terms of sum of squares. R square equals summation y1 minus y prime square minus summation of yi minus I forget that. Yeah, please give me till tomorrow to to give all the how we should pronounce or how we should term this y's here. But yi is the actual value of the dependent variable, while y prime equals mean of the dependent variable. Then the other one that's accentuated there is that's the predicted value of the dependent variable. So quite long, but of course, high R square indicates a good fit, where the model explains a large proportion of the variability in the dependent variable. A low R square indicates a poor fit, okay, where the model explains little of the variability in the dependent variable. Yeah, for example, when R square value of 0.8 means that 80% of the variability in the dependent variable can be explained by the independent variable. So later I also provided I also prepared calculation examples here that we have data for variables x and y, and then we solve for y prime. Okay. Jen, we go to the next slide. Normal distribution. I think we can end on just a moment. Normal distribution. So I can end on t distribution, but let's deal with normal distribution first. Normal distribution. Okay, also known as the Gaussian distribution is one of the most important continuous probability distributions in statistics. It is characterized by its bell-shaped curve, symmetric around the mean, describing many natural phenomena and data sets in various fields, including nature, industry, and research. So, symmetry means that the normal distribution is symmetric around its mean. And the bell-shaped curve, what does it mean? It is highest at the mean and tapers off as you move away from the mean. And then in mean median mode, in a perfect normal distribution, the mean median mode are all equal. And when you say asymptotic, the tails of the normal distribution approach the horizontal axis but never touch it. Okay, so you can see all those descriptions there. So we have again the mathematical formula of a normal distribution. The n of x mu rho equals 1 over square root of 2 pi rho square e minus 1/2. Raised to on 1/2 minus 1/2 times x minus mu, sorry, over rho square. Okay. Anyway, we will practice using calculator again. So please, each time we meet, you always have to be by your side, your calculator, okay? So that we can do that step by step. Yeah, good if you are using Excel, but in the board exam, we're not using it. We're using calculator. So we would rather do it so that we get the correct procedure, I mean the step-by-step process in the calculator itself. Okay. So at this point, you need to know sometimes they ask about the value of pi. And sometimes they ask in the board exam the value of exponents. So I hope you already know that. I will not teach that anymore, but of course you can see there pi 3.141599. So you need to remember that. And although you can see that in your calculator, but sa mabilisan ba when you're answering the board exams, value of pi, so A, B, C, D. So when you're familiar, so that's still the best strategy, right? When you're familiar, when you're very sure of it, 3.1459 and exponent E is equal to 2.71828. Easy? Okay. So standard normal distribution, where am I? Yeah, a special case of the normal distribution is the standard normal distribution, which has a mean mu of 0 and a standard deviation rho of 1. So please be familiarized with that. Okay, that mu means the mu like a letter M or like a letter M there is mean. Okay, so easy to memorize. Also, a standard deviation is rho. Okay, the one like a phi, but it's not really phi. So the standard normal distribution is used to convert any normal distribution to a standard form using the z-score formula. Z equals x minus mu over rho, where x is the value of the random variable and mu is the mean of distribution, and rho is the standard deviation of the distribution. Anyway, then there's the empirical rule. Okay, not anymore. I cannot see anyway. So the last two slides, Jen, another normal distribution. Okay, next slide. Okay, so let me see. Let me just check all those. The continuous, I think I mentioned already. That's about this one. Empirical rule. So yeah, I think I needed, this is testing, so I will cut it in chi-square. So probably we can go to the t distribution, Jen. Yeah, that's the one. T distribution here, also known as the student's t distribution. Do you know that? So it is a probability distribution that is symmetric and bell-shaped, similar to the normal distribution. So, but with heavier tails. Can you look that what it means by heavier tails? So it is used in statistics to estimate population parameters when the sample size is small and or the population variance is unknown. So there's mention about degrees of freedom, okay, DF. The t distribution is characterized by a single parameter known as the degrees of freedom. So the degrees of freedom are typically calculated as the sample size n minus 1, okay, and minus 1. So as the degrees of freedom increase, the distribution approaches the standard normal distribution. For large sample size, the t distribution and the normal distribution become nearly indistinguishable. So as to the shape and characteristics, it is similar to the normal distribution, but it has a heavier tail. So what does it mean? This means that it has higher probability of values far from the mean, far away, okay, away from the mean. So the heavier tails of the distribution account for the increased variability expected in smaller samples. So this property makes the t distribution more conservative than the normal distribution in hypothesis testing. So how do we apply t distribution? The t distribution is commonly used in hypothesis testing, so particularly for t-test, which assess whether the means of two groups are statistically different from each other. So it is also used to construct difference or construct confidence intervals, for the mean of a normally distributed population when the sample size is small and the population standard deviation is unknown. So for example, other practical examples that we can, for example, for smaller size or small size samples, suppose a researcher wants to estimate the average height of students in a particular class, so the sample size is small. So n equals 10. And the population standard deviation is unknown. So the researcher can use the t distribution to conduct or to construct a confidence interval for the mean height. For hypothesis testing, a company, for example, wants to test if a new drug is more is more effective than a placebo. So they conduct a study with a small size sample, measuring the effectiveness of the drug and the placebo. So the t-test can be used to determine if there's statistically significant difference between the two groups. Then for yeah, so this distribution is an essential tool in inferential statistics, especially when dealing with small sample sizes and unknown population variances. Okay, the last slide for tonight. Okay, the one, advance it. Next slide. Yes, that's the one. The drawing, the chi-square. That's the one. So, this is an example actually of chi distribution, but I think there's some more lengthy or a better slide than this. Anyway. So we have examples. I think, yeah, I'm looking for the one, I think Jen. Yeah, I'll skip this one because this is an example that should be computed anyway. Okay, so for tonight, we can skip that. I'm looking for the concept, not this example, Jen. So I think we can end that tonight, and tomorrow, we will start with